The notification hit like a spark in a dark room. A single ping from the banking app, the kind you normally ignore, but this one felt different. The screen lit up, and the number stared back with a calm confidence that didn't match the chaos inside my chest. $3,000? Not from a job, not from overtime, not from some sprint of exhaustion. It was passive. Money that arrived without a clock-in, without a boss, without begging the universe for another stroke of luck. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I kept refreshing the page, half expecting the number to glitch, to vanish, to correct itself into something ordinary. But it stayed. Quiet, steady, real. A cold wave rolled through me, not fear, but disbelief. The kind you feel when something finally goes right after a lifetime of things falling apart. My fingers hovered over the screen, and all I could think was, how did I get here? How did someone like me build income streams that were paying me every single month? The room around me felt unreal. A small apartment, dim desk lamp, old laptop held together with tape. The same setup I used on nights when I didn't know if the power bill would clear. It snapped me straight into a memory I tried to forget, sitting in this same spot 2 years earlier. Staring at my bank balance less than $50, rent overdue, groceries rationed, and a knot in my stomach that didn't loosen for weeks. Back then, the idea of earning even $100 online felt like fantasy. 3,000 might as well have been a myth. But something changed. A spark, a moment of anger or hope, or maybe both, pushed me to try. And that push eventually turned into 4 streams of income, each one built in the quiet hours after work. Each one fighting me, teaching me, testing me. At first they trickled, then they grew. Then they formed something that no longer felt fragile. So as I stared at the screen, the numbers shining like proof that life could shift, I didn't feel proud. I felt lucky. Lucky that the early mistakes didn't break me. Lucky that the late nights didn't turn into nothing. Lucky that the 4 streams I'd built were finally working together. But what I didn't know then was how close all of this came to falling apart before the first dollar even arrived. There was pressure. Not the kind you feel at the end of a long week, but the kind that gnaws at your chest every morning when you wake up to bills you can't pay, and a future that seems entirely uncertain. Rent was climbing faster than my paycheck. Groceries felt like a luxury. Every headline screamed that the world didn't wait for anyone. Inflation was at record highs. Tech layoffs were everywhere, and even the safest jobs seemed like a temporary illusion. It wasn't just money, it was survival. Every missed opportunity, every delayed decision, every moment I spent doubting myself felt like another chain tightening around my life. Remember scrolling through social media late at night. My phone, a small, glowing reminder of the wealth others had built. Friends flaunting side hustles. Strangers sharing screenshots of passive earnings that dwarfed my monthly salary. Financial gurus promising freedom if you just followed their template. Every post was a punch in the gut, a whisper that maybe I was falling behind. I couldn't just watch. I had to act. The weight of stagnation was unbearable. Pressure I carried silently as I tried to figure out how to escape the cycle. It was more than envy or ambition. I felt a responsibility to myself, to my family, to the life I wanted but couldn't afford yet. Every paycheck was eaten alive by recurring bills, unexpected expenses, and the creeping anxiety that the system itself seemed stacked against me. And the more I tried to plan, the more I realized that relying on a traditional job wasn't enough. Jobs were volatile. Promotions were uncertain. The economy was merciless. Every day that passed without building something else felt like time stolen from my future. I began mapping out possibilities in the dead of night, scribbling notes, researching trends, and devouring every story I could find of people who had broken free. I knew one thing for certain. If I didn't create multiple income streams, I would remain trapped in the same loop indefinitely. It wasn't about luxury, it was about breathing room, autonomy, and the fragile security of knowing that even if one stream faltered, I wouldn't be left bankrupt. Both financially and mentally, at first, the pressure felt unbearable. The mistakes piled up, the platforms changed rules without warning, The voices of doubt, both external and internal, threatened to drown me. I could feel the tension in every decision, every late night, every calculated risk. But it was this exact pressure, this unbearable weight, that forced creativity, grit, and relentless persistence. Slowly, methodically, the foundation of something larger began to take shape. And then came the first hint of validation. The very first small deposit that wasn't tied to my day job. It was tiny, almost laughable, but it felt like a crack in the wall of the impossible. It was the spark that whispered, maybe this could work. Maybe all those sleepless nights, the stress, the fear, they weren't wasted. Maybe freedom was achievable, one stream at a time. But just as I allowed myself to imagine possibility, I knew deep down that this was only the beginning. The system I was navigating was complex, ruthless, and unforgiving. And what happened next sent shockwaves that tested every ounce of my resolve, threatening to undo everything before it had even begun. Every hero needs a villain, and mine wasn't a single person. It wasn't someone I could point to and say, they're the problem. My villain was far more insidious. It was the noise, the misinformation, the false promises. The endless parade of shiny shortcuts designed to make me feel both desperate and incompetent. It was the world of online finance itself, a place where ambition and greed collided, where scams masqueraded as opportunity, and where every failure felt like proof I was incapable at first. I thought the obstacle was my lack of experience, my limited resources, my failures. I had convinced myself that if I had just worked harder, I could make the numbers add up, beat the system, and finally create freedom. But it wasn't just my own shortcomings I was fighting. Every step forward came with whispers from every corner of the internet. Passive income is a myth. You'll never escape the 9-to-5. The algorithms are rigged against you. Some voices were well-meaning, others predatory. All of them a reminder that the world I was trying to navigate was treacherous. Courses promised overnight wealth for hundreds of dollars, but left me empty-handed and questioning my own judgment. Gurus flaunted luxurious lifestyles, carefully curated, hiding the months or years of struggle it took to reach those points. Social media was relentless, a constant parade of screenshots, milestones, viral moments. Every image, every post, every success story made my own progress feel infinitesimal. I began to internalize the pressure, comparing my failures to others' successes. And the shadow of doubt grew heavier. Even those closest to me became part of the obstacle. Friends who didn't understand, colleagues who laughed at the idea of building streams of income. Family members who couldn't see the point in risking stability for uncertainty, they all became unwitting villains. A chorus reinforcing the idea that maybe I was chasing a fantasy. Every time I explained my plans, I could see the skepticism in their eyes. It's not sustainable, they said. Why waste your time? Each word chipped away at confidence. A subtle erosion of belief that nearly broke me more than any financial setback could. Then there were the systems themselves. Platforms changed rules without notice. Ads dropped overnight. Affiliate programs terminated accounts. Algorithms shifted. What worked yesterday was punished today. The very infrastructure I was trying to build my streams on seemed designed to make me fail. A silent, unyielding antagonist that required constant adaptation, vigilance, and resilience. The villain wasn't someone with a face. It was an entire ecosystem built to challenge me at every turn. And yet, this villain was necessary. The failures, the setbacks, the constant tension, they forged skills I didn't know I had. I learned to read between the lines, to spot traps, to anticipate shifts before they happened. Every near disaster became a lesson, every algorithm change a test of patience and creativity. But the emotional toll was enormous. Nights spent awake wondering if the previous month's gains would evaporate in a single click. Days of grinding while watching others seem to succeed effortlessly. Moments where I almost quit, convinced that the system had won despite all this. The first spark of success began to pierce the chaos. A small win, a modest deposit. A single positive message from someone benefiting from what I built was enough to keep the fight alive. But I knew that the villain would not rest. Every income stream, every idea, every breakthrough would be tested, challenged, and threatened. And just when I thought I had a handle on the system, another storm would appear, ready to tear everything down. The villain was patient, relentless, invisible. It was not just against me, but against anyone who dared to carve a path outside the ordinary. And it was only by understanding its patterns, anticipating its moves, and learning to persist that I could hope to succeed. But while I prepared for the battles ahead, I had no idea that the hero within me, the resilience, the creativity, the grit, was already being shaped, ready to face the challenge that would define everything. The next chapter wasn't about the villain alone. It was about why I was uniquely positioned to fight back. And that story would reveal everything the world of passive income had taught me before the real journey began, before the first dollar ever appeared in my account, before the late nights and endless spreadsheets, before the anxiety that gripped me every time I checked my bank balance. There was a story that no one could see. A story of struggle, of mistakes, of quiet moments, where I wondered if I'd ever get out of the cycle that seemed to define my life. The hero in this story wasn't born with a silver spoon or a shortcut. I was ordinary in every sense, living paycheck to paycheck, watching the world move forward while I stayed stuck, feeling powerless in the shadow of others' success. I grew up in a household where money was always scarce. Every bill was a battle, every grocery trip a negotiation. I watched my parents work themselves to exhaustion, sacrificing sleep, health, and happiness to keep the lights on. And yet, despite their sacrifices, the anxiety never left the room. It seeped into my bones, a silent teacher that taught me the value of every cent and the fragility of financial stability. I learned early that life didn't reward effort alone. It required strategy, foresight, and a willingness to endure discomfort that others avoided. But those lessons came wrapped in fear. I carried the worry forward into my first job, where I traded time for money, slowly realizing that no matter how hard I worked, my bank account never seemed to reflect it. The raises were small, the promotions uncertain, and the bills kept growing faster than my salary. I saw friends and colleagues get ahead, and a part of me wanted to lash out at the world for being unfair. But another part of me began to see a different truth, that if I wanted to escape, I couldn't wait for luck. I had to create it. Early failures shaped me more than successes. I invested in side hustles without understanding them, wasted money on courses that promised instant results, and fell for the flashy advice of self-proclaimed experts. Every mistake was a lesson, every loss a push toward refinement. I became obsessed with understanding the mechanics behind money, how algorithms, markets, and systems worked, and how I could leverage them. I studied late into the night, dissected successful creators, and analyzed patterns that most people ignored. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't fast, but it was the foundation of a mindset that would eventually allow me to see opportunity where others saw risk. The turning point came quietly. One night, staring at an empty bank account and thinking about rent due tomorrow, I realized that waiting for a miracle was no longer an option. The stakes weren't about comfort, they were about survival, autonomy, and the ability to make choices without fear. I promised myself that no obstacle, no algorithm, no naysayer would define my limits again. I would treat the world of passive income like a battlefield, learning every rule, anticipating every move, and using every setback as fuel. That determination was only part of the hero's story. There was also creativity, discipline, and a willingness to take calculated risks. I learned to break down complex problems into manageable steps, to measure progress in small victories, and to persist even when the numbers seemed hopeless. I experimented relentlessly, sometimes failing spectacularly, but always analyzing, adjusting, and moving forward. By the time the first small deposit hit my account, I wasn't just a beginner getting lucky. I was someone who had earned the right to see potential in a chaotic system. Equally important was the emotional drive behind the journey. Success meant more than money. It meant freedom from fear, the ability to build security where none existed, the power to rewrite the story I had inherited. Every dollar in passive income carried with it the weight of years of struggle. the lessons of repeated failures, and the promise of a future where choice mattered more than survival. It was deeply personal, a rebellion against circumstance and a statement of resilience. And so, as the foundations of my 4 passive income streams began to take shape, I was not just building money, I was building identity, the habits, the persistence, the willingness to endure setbacks, the quiet belief in the possibility of better. All of these became the core of the hero who would face the battles ahead. I wasn't invincible and I would stumble again and again, but I was ready. What I didn't know then was that each of the 4 income streams would test not only my skills, but my patience, my grit, and my resolve. Each one would bring its own battles, near failures, and moments where quitting seemed like the only rational choice. And yet, the foundation had been laid. The hero was ready, the stakes were clear, and the journey was only beginning. The first income stream loomed ahead, a challenge that would define whether the lessons of the past were enough to survive the trials of the present. The first stream began quietly, almost unnoticeably. It wasn't glamorous or revolutionary, just a small online venture, an experiment born from late nights and endless research. At first, progress was agonizingly slow. The numbers trickled in, a few dollars here, a few there, barely enough to feel like success. I kept checking, recalculating, wondering if I was wasting months of effort for nothing. Then came the first real scare. A sudden platform policy change wiped out a week of growth. Overnight, metrics dropped, and I stared at the dashboard in disbelief. Every plan, every adjustment, every sleepless night seemed to unravel in a single moment. Panic set in. I questioned every decision, doubted my skills, and felt the shadow of failure creep close. It was tempting to quit, to walk away and retreat to the comfort of a traditional job, but giving up wasn't an option. I dug deeper, studied patterns, and adjusted strategies. Slowly, the stream began to stabilize. Small wins multiplied, algorithms finally aligned, and deposits began appearing consistently. That first taste of financial independence, though modest, felt like a lifeline. It proved the system could work if approached with patience and discipline. The hero in me began to awaken fully. This small victory ignited confidence, and the fear that had haunted me since childhood transformed into motivation. But I knew better than to assume the battle was over. Every platform, every algorithm, every external factor could threaten this fragile success at any moment. And as this first stream began to grow, hints of the next challenge already loomed on the horizon. The path to $3,000 per month was still long, and each step would test not only skill but resolve, endurance, and grit. The journey had just begun. The second stream arrived like a storm I hadn't anticipated. Unlike the first, it demanded constant attention, precision, and timing. I poured hours into research, learning the rules, the pitfalls, and the hidden levers that could make or break it. At first it seemed promising. Small wins trickled in, giving hope that this could be the backbone of my growing portfolio. But almost immediately, obstacles appeared. Algorithms shifted, platforms changed policies without warning, and a single misstep cost hundreds of dollars overnight. Panic returned, tighter and sharper than before. Whispering that I was overreaching, I reminded myself of the first stream, how near failure had almost broken me. This time, I couldn't afford mistakes. Every strategy was scrutinized, every action deliberate. Friends questioned my sanity. "Why chase this?" they asked. "It's too unstable." Their doubts echoed in my mind, but I pressed on, driven by the fear of remaining stuck and the hunger to prove that persistence could create security. The pressure felt relentless, yet it forced me to adapt, refine, and innovate. The third stream came next, smaller in scale but deceptively complex. Its mechanics overlapped with the second, creating a tension between the two. Hours spent optimizing one threatened the growth of the other. There were nights I worked until my eyes blurred, juggling dashboards, spreadsheets, notifications, feeling the stakes in every heartbeat. It was exhausting, but slowly, patterns emerged. I began to see how the streams could complement each other, rather than compete, and small victories fueled the drive to continue. Yet nothing was straightforward. Each stream faced threats. Ad rates dropped, audience engagement dipped, and occasional technical glitches threatened weeks of work. The pressure mounted, and I realized that success wasn't just about skill, it was about resilience, discipline, and emotional endurance. Every setback tested the boundaries of my patience. Every tiny win reminded me why I started. Amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. Each stream began to gain traction, reinforcing the other. Revenue stabilized, deposits became predictable, and confidence began to replace panic. The sense of momentum was intoxicating, a reminder that calculated risk and relentless persistence could beat uncertainty. But the battle was far from over. The market was unpredictable, the algorithms capricious, and a single misstep could still undo weeks of effort. I learned that building multiple streams wasn't just about diversifying income, it was about mastering the mental game, balancing strategy with endurance, and preparing for the inevitable shocks ahead. And as I prepared for the fourth game-changing stream, I knew it would either solidify everything I'd built or challenge me in ways I hadn't yet imagined. The next step would demand every lesson I'd learned and push me closer to the ultimate goal. The fourth stream arrived quietly. It's almost like a secret waiting to be discovered. Unlike the previous ones, it didn't require constant firefighting or endless tweaks. It was simple, elegant, and scalable, a system that, if executed correctly, could carry the weight of everything else. But simplicity was deceptive. I had to experiment, iterate, and adapt, testing every assumption until the results were undeniable. At first, growth was slow. Every small victory felt hard-won, each deposit a confirmation that the strategy worked. Then one breakthrough changed everything, a viral moment, a surge of engagement, a spike in revenue that felt almost unreal. Suddenly, this fourth stream wasn't just supporting the others. It was stabilizing the entire system. Months of effort, failures, and learning converged into a single, consistent flow of income. The impact was immediate. The streams that had once felt fragile now formed a resilient network. One could falter, and the others would hold. The fear that had shadowed every deposit, every metric, began to fade. For the first time, I could see what $3,000 a month in passive income really meant: freedom, flexibility, and the proof that persistence pays off. But even in triumph, the lesson was clear. Success demanded vigilance. Platforms would change, markets would fluctuate, and the next challenge was always lurking. The fourth stream was a turning point, not an endpoint. A foundation for growth and security, but one that had to be nurtured, monitored, and defended. As I watched the combined streams begin to deliver consistent returns, the reality sank in. I had done it. For income streams, $3,000 a month. A system built from nothing but discipline, strategy, and relentless effort. Yet even in this moment of victory, I knew the journey wasn't over. The real test, the test of resilience, adaptation, and long-term sustainability, was just beginning. The next storm was waiting. Every lesson learned would be needed to weather it. Just when the system felt secure, the world reminded me it never rests. 1 month AD rates plunged without warning. Another, an algorithm shift, cut engagement by half. Platforms updated policies overnight, nullifying weeks of work. The fragile confidence I had built began to wobble. Panic returned, sharper and colder than before. A reminder that even victories are temporary in the world of passive income. The streams I had nurtured faced tests unlike any before. Revenue dipped, deposits fluctuated, and every metric on my dashboard became a source of anxiety. Social media was unforgiving. Commenters proclaimed passive income dead. Skeptics doubted my approach. And friends suggested returning to a real job where security felt guaranteed. Every warning echoed the early days. But this time the stakes were higher. The foundation was established. But even a small misstep could unravel everything. It was relentless. Days of monitoring dashboards turned into nights of recalculating strategies. I combed through analytics, adjusting ads, content, and campaigns with precision. Every change was measured, every action deliberate. Failure wasn't an option. Too much depended on consistency. Slowly, pattern recognition emerged. I could anticipate trends, adapt quickly, and protect each stream from sudden disruption. The chaos became a teacher, forcing me to refine systems and strengthen the foundation. And then came the turning point. Instead of reacting to every shock, I stepped back, focused on what truly mattered, and optimized the processes that were within my control. The streams began to stabilize again, stronger than before. Each setback had left a lesson embedded. Resilience matters more than speed. Strategy matters more than luck, and persistence trumps panic by the end. The storms that once threatened to destroy everything instead reinforced the system. I realized that building passive income wasn't just about earning money, it was about mastering uncertainty, managing risk, and developing a mindset resilient enough to endure volatility. The foundation had survived and the path forward was clear, but even with stability restored, I knew the journey wasn't over. Each lesson learned would carry into the final reflections, revealing the deeper truths about money, discipline, and the cost of greed. And those lessons would form the final defining chapter of this story. By the time the stream stabilized, the numbers were more than just digits. They were proof of a journey forged in struggle, persistence, and discipline. I had learned that passive income isn't magic. It's patience executed relentlessly, mistakes analyzed, and strategies refined. Each setback had taught me that fear and doubt are part of the process, but they can't dictate the outcome. The greatest lesson wasn't financial, it was mental. Building multiple income streams demanded focus, resilience, and the ability to endure uncertainty without losing sight of the goal. Greed and shortcuts would have destroyed everything, but consistency and integrity preserved it. I realized that wealth isn't just about accumulation. It's about control, freedom, and the confidence to navigate life without constant worry. These streams were more than revenue. They were a framework for growth, security, and opportunity. They proved that even someone starting with nothing could create stability, challenge the odds, and rewrite their financial story. The journey reinforced that discipline, ethics, and patience outweigh luck or talent. Every challenge faced, every failure survived, became a building block for lasting success. And as I reflected on the months of work, the nights of doubt, and the victories both small and large, one truth became undeniable. Financial freedom is earned, not gifted. And the lessons learned along the way are more valuable than the money itself. The stage was set for the final chapter, the reflection, the inspiration, and the call to action that would complete the story and empower anyone watching to take the first step toward their own journey. Looking back, it's clear that the journey wasn't about the money alone. The $3,000 a month in passive income was proof, yes, but more importantly, it was evidence of persistence, strategy, and resilience. Each stream, each setback, each late night of doubt shaped a system that could endure, adapt, and grow. The financial freedom wasn't a single moment. It was the sum of countless small victories and lessons learned along the way. If there's one takeaway from this story, it's that success isn't reserved for the privileged or the lucky. It's earned through discipline, calculated risk, and the courage to act even when the odds feel stacked against you. Building income streams takes patience, focus, and a willingness to embrace failure as part of the process. But when done right, it transforms more than your bank account. It transforms your confidence, your options, and your ability to create the life you want now. The question is simple. What will you do with the knowledge you have today? Will you wait, or will you start building your own path to freedom? Every small step counts, every decision matters, and every experiment teaches something invaluable. If this story inspired you, take the first step. Explore, learn, and act. And if you want more stories like this, finance lessons, real-life income strategies, and cinematic journeys from struggle to freedom, subscribe and join the community. The journey is just beginning, and the next breakthrough could be yours.